So, imagine this. The world has just gone through the most brutal, destructive war in human history. We're talking millions dead, entire empires have crumbled, and a whole generation is just scarred. The question is, where do you even start? How do you rebuild a shattered world and try to make a peace that actually sticks?
Well, one man thought he had the answer. And his plan, it was so bold, so audacious, you could call it either genius or maybe just incredibly naive. So today, we're diving into that plan. We're going to look at the massive gamble he took and, believe it or not, how it's still echoing in our world right now.
Okay, so first things first, we really need to get a handle on the problem. I mean, what broke the world in the first place? For U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, it wasn't just one thing. He saw it as this toxic, old system that had been around for centuries.
And this slide, it pretty much sums up Wilson's diagnosis for what caused the Great War. In his mind, Europe was being run by these power-hungry monarchs and politicians cutting secret deals behind closed doors, basically carving up the globe for their own empires. He looked at these huge permanent armies and thought, well, of course there's going to be a war. It made conflict practically inevitable. This wasn't a world run by the people, it was run for a few powerful rulers.
So for Woodrow Wilson, getting America into this war, it wasn't just about winning. Oh no, it was a crusade. He truly saw it as this golden opportunity, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime chance, to completely tear down that old, broken system and build something new, something better. His goal was huge, to remake the entire world and make it safe for democracy.
So what was this radical new plan? I mean, what did it actually look like on paper? Well, it was a set of ideas so revolutionary they were literally going to change the entire conversation of global politics forever.
Okay, so picture this. January 8th, 1918. The war is still raging, it's brutal. And Wilson goes right in front of Congress and lays out this grand vision. He called it the 14 points. And let me tell you, this was not just another peace plan. It was a blueprint for a whole new way of running the world.
Now, the 14 points themselves were pretty detailed, but you can boil them down to 4 huge core ideas. First up, end the secret deals. Wilson wanted everything out in the open, transparency. Second, free and open commerce around the world. Let ships sail, let goods move. Third, and this one was a real game changer, self-determination. The idea that people should get to choose their own government, not be ruled by some distant empire. And finally, number 4, let's talk, not fight. Create a global organization where countries could work out their problems with words, not weapons.
And that fourth point, the one about creating a global forum, that was probably the most revolutionary idea of them all. See, for centuries, diplomacy had been all about power politics, what they call realpolitik, a big chess game. Wilson was suggesting a total break from that. His idea was rooted in a theory we now call liberal institutionalism. The thinking behind it is pretty simple. If you create stable international groups, like his Association of Nations, you can actually change how countries act. You build trust, you give them a place to talk, and maybe, just maybe, war becomes less likely. He was trying to take this big academic theory and make it real on a global scale.
But, having a beautiful idea is one thing. The messy, harsh reality of politics after a devastating war, that is a whole different beast. Wilson's idealistic plan was on a collision course with a world full of old grudges and pure self-interest.
And for a moment, it really looked like his vision might just pull it off. The regular people in Europe, who were just so tired of war, they treated him like an absolute rock star. Seriously, when he got to Paris for the peace talks, the crowds were massive, all chanting, "Vive Wilson! Long live Wilson!" You could feel this incredible wave of hope in the air.
But here's the thing. While the crowds were cheering in the streets, the other Allied leaders in the negotiating rooms, well, they were a lot less impressed. Wilson is there talking about democracy and open peace. They're thinking about grabbing more territory, punishing Germany so it can never be a threat again, and of course, keeping their own empires intact. Their goals couldn't have been more different.
And this quote from the French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau just says it all. It perfectly captures the kind of deep skepticism Wilson was up against. It's clever for sure, but it is just dripping with cynicism from a guy who'd seen it all. He's basically saying, God gave us 10 commandments and we couldn't even follow those. Now this American professor gives us 14 points. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. It's like, nice ideas, kid. Now welcome to the real world.
And reality hit hard.
To get the other leaders on board with his most precious idea, that 14th point, the League of Nations, Wilson had to start making deals. He had to compromise, and that meant sacrificing some of his other core principles. A really stark example of this, he had to agree to give territory in China that had been controlled by Germany over to Japan, just to keep Japan happy and in the League. It was a brutal compromise that completely went against his own idea of self-determination for millions of people in China.
So Wilson leaves Europe with a victory, but it's a compromised one. And he probably thought the hardest part was over. Nope. His biggest fight was still ahead of him, and it was going to happen right back at home, in the U.S. Senate.
Right. So back in Washington, this powerful faction of senators, the isolationists, were basically waiting for him, sharpening their knives. Their leader was a very sharp politician named Henry Cabot Lodge, and their argument was pretty straightforward. Joining this League of Nations would mean giving up American independence and getting dragged into every single messy fight that happens over in Europe.
And Lodge was smart. He cheekily countered Wilson's 14 points with his own list of 14 reservations. Basically, a list of changes to protect U.S. interests. But Wilson, he was exhausted, he was sick, and he felt like he'd already compromised away his soul in Paris. He just wouldn't budge. He refused to negotiate. And then he made a huge political error. He tied the League of Nations Charter directly to the overall peace treaty. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. He was telling the Senate, take it or leave it. You pass both, or you get nothing.
And here it is, the great tragic irony of this whole story. The Senate said leave it. They rejected the treaty. So the United States, the very country whose president dreamed up the League of Nations, never even joined. The grand vision was dead on arrival, right in his own backyard.
But wait, the story doesn't end there, because this is where things get really complicated. Even though Wilson's big plan failed at the time, the ideas behind it, well, they didn't die. They took on a life of their own, a long, messy, and really powerful afterlife.
Look, let's be clear. The League of Nations did not prevent World War II. It couldn't stop the rise of fascism. So if you're measuring it on that goal alone, it was a total failure. But the ideas Wilson put out into the world, especially that powerful one about self-determination, they had planted a seed, and that seed was about to sprout in ways he could never have imagined.
See, Wilson might have just been thinking about redrawing the map of Europe, but people all over the world were listening. Aspiring leaders in places like Vietnam and India heard these words and thought, hey, that applies to us too. They grabbed onto the idea of self-determination and turned it into this incredible weapon to fight for independence from their colonial rulers. It was a spark for the decolonization movement.
But, like a lot of powerful ideas, this one had a dark side. The very same principle was twisted and used for conquest. Think about it. Hitler justified his invasions by claiming he was just uniting all the German-speaking people under one flag. It was a complete, grotesque distortion of what Wilson meant, but it shows how an idea meant to set people free can be warped to oppress them.
And what happened to the League itself? Well, after the horror of World War II, the world decided to give the idea another shot. They basically dusted off the blueprint from Wilson's failed League, looked at what went wrong, and used it to build something new, something hopefully stronger on its foundations. And that, of course, is the United Nations. Which brings us to our final, lingering question. Wilson's original League is pretty much a footnote in history books now, but its direct descendant, the UN, is still here. Flawed for sure, but a central piece of our world. We are still living in the world shaped by Wilson's gamble. So I'll leave you with this. Is his vision of countries choosing to talk instead of fight, this idea of collective security, is it just a failed dream, or is it maybe an unfinished project that we are all in some way still working on today?